comes to a crashing point when on his 5th birthday, December 6, 1975, David Murray dies. Now, personally, I strongly believe William Afton also killed David, just like he did Fiona, but that's a topic for another day. So, what actually happened to David Murray? You may already have an answer. However, I've found something that may change our perspective on the story. To answer what David Murray's true story is, we're going to have to take a look at the history of his story before diving into what's been uncovered, hidden in plain sight, and how this discovery could change the entirety of FNAF lore as we knew it.
You are the face of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza.
David Sean Murray has probably been one of the single greatest talking points in the larger FNAF lore since the release of Secret of the Mimic. His story was given to us first in Tales from the Pizzaplex, a bright young boy who lived alone with his genius inventor father, Edwin Murray. His mother had passed away giving birth to him, causing Edwin to struggle with raising his child while keeping up with Fazbear's strict expectations on deadlines. He eventually builds the Mimic to keep him entertained, and then tragically, David Murray is killed while running after his ball into traffic. In the games, however, his story differs. For the most part, the general plot point stays the same. Fiona does die, causing Edwin to build the Mimic, and David is killed in a tragic accident. At least, that's what the game seems to want you to think. I do believe there's more to the story of David Murray hidden just beneath the surface, and all we have to do is put the pieces together. So, to start with the circumstances that the game provides indicating that it was an accident, much like in the books, the first clue that we have is actually the book itself. Now, yes, the books do differ from the games, a lot in fact, but typically they tend to follow similar plot lines, even if differing, meaning it's likely David still would have died in some kind of accident. This is then followed by the fact that one of the audio logs we hear from Edwin in-game is him talking with his lawyer about the positioning of David's playground.
Look, I get your concerns, I do, but they're all just groundless. This is the perfect spot for David's playground. I can watch him play while I'm loading and unloading freight, and he'll be under watch at all times out there. The loading dock is like 200 feet away, and there's a fence and everything. I know you're my lawyer and all, but there's no regulation that says I can't have it there, so just get off my back. Besides, David loves the new slide. It'll be fine.
In which his lawyer is expressing concerns about safety, and Edwin insists that it is perfectly safe since he can watch David while loading and unloading freight. The next we hear about this playground is on David's birthday, the day he died, where Edwin tells M1 to go get David to surprise him for his birthday that Edwin had been setting up, saying he left David at the playground, obviously unattended since Edwin was inside the admin wing the whole time. This then perfectly sets up for a parallel to the books, where David is killed in some kind of accident involving a vehicle, since in the games the concern was explicitly how close it was to the loading docks, and the difference would be his death happening at the factory in the games versus on a highway just outside the factory in the books. Great, so it's solved. Well, that was fast. Or was it? Now, yes, the game obviously sets up this idea of David dying at the loading docks from a vehicle very well. However, when has FNAF ever just been what we're told at a surface level? Certainly not since the first game, I can tell you that. Let's take a listen.
Now, concerning your safety, the only real risk to you as a night watchman here, if any, is the fact that these characters, if they happen to see you after hours, probably won't recognize you as a person. They'll most likely see you as a metal endoskeleton without its costume on. Now, since that's against the rules here at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, they'll probably try to forcefully stuff you inside a Freddy Fazbear suit.
The phone call set up the idea that the animatronics are simply attacking you because they're running on a faulty AI that considered a human being a bare endoskeleton, and they're trying to make sure that you're ready for showtime. The calls in FNAF 1 are essentially the audio logs for Secret of the Mimic. They're the parts of the game that are voice acted which tell the story of the game at a very surface level, in which we are meant to investigate deeper. So in FNAF 1, we're meant to assume that the animatronics are just faulty AI, but listening to the groans and death rattles they make just before they attack you, alongside the newspapers in the hallways which detail an event that would be deemed the MCI, as well as mentions of the suits leaking blood and mucus, is the deeper level of the story that we're meant to uncover, using the environment and character motivations to realize that No, it's not faulty AI like we're told. It's dead children haunting the robots that are trying to kill you in the same way that they were killed. Great, so what's the deeper story that we might be missing about David Murray? Well, I believe that what we're missing is how exactly he died, and how that affects the story. So if he didn't die by car, what else do we have to look at? Well, a theorist by the name of Candy Bunny put out a theory a while ago called MoonDrop, so I recommend you go check her theory out. I'll link it here. But the general claim of the video is that the events we're told at the end of Moon.exe are meant to be put into an order that details how David died. He ran with the silent hunter in the snow relating to the time of year he died, being in December, and in an environment that certifiably snows even in September. He spelled his name in the stars relating to the storytime area in which there are giant spelling blocks around his hideout, which has stars everywhere hanging from the ceiling, and also a star orphan collectible inside the hideout. And then he bounced his ball on the moon relating to how he died, with the giant moon in the storytime area falling on him and crushing him to his death, in which his signature ball, which he chased in the books, causing his death, is found inside the moon that fell. Wow, okay, so that seems really solid too. Not only does the game provide something to look deeper into with the environment, but it also gives vague text in Moon.exe lore minigames that lay out a time, place, and method for his death, as well as paralleling the books with him chasing the ball leading to his death. Well, great, so now it's solved. That was easy. Or was it? No, but seriously, go check her theory out, it's really good. But we actually have one more possibility for his death that we need to look at, which is actually again hinted with Moon.exe. In Moon.exe, we seem to be playing as M2 for whatever reason. There are many things that relate to David throughout the game, and yet are referenced as being his or about him, indicating we are not David, even though our actions would seem to mostly fit, meaning we're probably M2. So if we're not David, where is he? Well, we have Sleepy Moon, which seems to represent Edwin, with Edwin's voice actor also voicing Sleepy Moon, as well as Sleepy Moon in Moon.exe doing things that seem typical for a father, telling the player to go back to bed or go to sleep. And we have a note from the child asking the moon to bring back the sun, as well as F10 representing herself as the sun in Moon.exe when we see her in R&D, meaning we have Edwin and a Fiona, so where's David? Well, there's a small owl that often follows us around that we save from an alligator, and this owl is actually likely a callback to the owl seen in Tiger Rock, where a small metallic owl with heterochromia is seen at one point in the story. Since there are obvious connections with David and Tiger Rock, and Tiger Rock and the owl share the same heterochromia, it would seem that this owl is also related to David in some way, meaning the owl is probably David in Moon.exe. Well, at one point in Moon.exe, we see the owl inside the shack with Sun, and after repairing all the masks, Sun hands us a baby owl mask and says we can fool the moon with it, and the owl mysteriously disappears, and our character notes that the oven now smells like chicken. So, it would seem that Sun killed the baby owl, and if Sun is M1, and David is the owl, it would appear that M1 killed David. Now, we could get into speculation about why M1 would do this, but it would ultimately be pointless if this lacked any credence within the game. So, is there any evidence? Well, the last thing we hear Edwin tell M1 to do is to go get David.
I baked it myself for David's special day.
Well, great job. You just continue to surprise me. All right, I think we're ready. Okay, everyone hide. Fiona, go get him. I left him out at the playground.
M1 could have very easily killed David, possibly by accident due to AI not understanding nuance, or possibly on purpose to have a robot version of her child, but it is a valid option regardless. Okay, well here's where I'd say, great, that was easy. But we're kind of running into a problem here. Every single one of these theories seems really valid. David being killed by a car, David being crushed by the moon, David being killed by M1, but if you've noticed, they're all mutually exclusive. These all work great, but only one of them can be correct, right? Well, if we can't figure it out based on the environment, like the newspapers were for us in FNAF 1, maybe we can figure it out by what the spirit of the kid is doing, like the animatronics trying to stuff you the same way that they were. So now we have to take a look at Tiger? Wait, if almost all these theories so far have been about David dying in some kind of accident, why the hell is his spirit even around? And why the hell does David's spirit kill Arnold? I mean, it's not like David would have been killed, right? Okay, I know. We gotta break some stuff down before I start jumping to conclusions. Well, so far we've concluded that people who have been killed typically come back vengeful, but is there any credence to this? I mean, for starters, we got all of FNAF 1 through 6. We know those are children killed by Afton who are now angry, but do we have anything that suggests someone killed in an accident wouldn't be vengeful? Well, let's take a look at all of the people who have died in the games so that we can make a conclusion before jumping into the books. Now, the immediate first dead kid we can think of was actually someone who was killed in an accident, that being the crying girl. However, there are a lot of debates about his specifics, including if he was potentially killed after the bite on purpose.
You know you need to. You won't last without me. Join us.
Bum 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 bum. As well as if his spirit is even around, or if he even knows what's going on. So I'm going to call for a rain check on that one and move on to the next kid, Charlie. Now, I say next because I'm not trying to get into Charlie 87's semantics with this one, so I'll stick with the popular belief for this purpose. And despite her saying in Ultimate Custom Night that she doesn't hate you, she does indeed kill the FNAF 2 guards if let out of the box.
I don't hate you, but you need to stay out of my way.
So I'm giving my stamp of approval on that one. The MCI? Yep, Ralph even calls them vengeful in the week before. The DCI? Debatable. There's my preferred take that the DCI don't even exist. However, if they are real, then it's uncertain still if they possess anything or if they simply move on. However, if they do possess anything, they're probably in the toys, so that gets my stamp of approval too. William himself in Springtrap is definitely vengeful, although I'm not sure we can say what happened to him was necessarily an accident, so I'll say intentional killing and vengeful, so that also gets my stamp of approval. Now, when we get into Sister Location, things get a bit messy. The Funtimes were probably killing many children as we can see with T-Dread's schedule theory, but I'm uncertain on how to classify them. They're for sure intentional killings, but they're also done through a robot with no will of their own. I suppose if I was killed by one, I'd consider it intentional. Elizabeth certainly seems to agree, so how about their vengefulness? Well, they show signs of something supernatural going on, but they also mostly seem to be piloted by AI. So it's hard to say what the kids' spirits themselves are going through. I think I'll give this one a stamp of approval, since Molten Freddy is said to have the most amount of remnant, and definitely kills Mike if given the chance, so approved. FNAF 6 is just a collection of all the already dead kids, so not much going on there. Well, how about the employees? Ralph is killed by the vengeful spirits of the children, and yet doesn't seem to be vengeful himself. But that kind of gets dubious for me. It kind of feels like the same issue for the Funtimes. Like, there wasn't an actual person who killed Ralph, just possessed robots. But regardless, Ralph is not vengeful, so denied. There's also the technicians who were killed by Ennard. However, again, their presence isn't known after death, so I'm going to give them a denied as well. Employees who are spring-locked? While we don't have any official evidence of people dying from the spring locks, it's certainly implied, and I'd consider those more along the lines of an accident personally. Haha, yes, Fazbear Entertainment denying fault for spring-locked employees. But the suits obviously weren't designed specifically to kill people, unlike the Funtimes, or else I doubt William would ever wear one. So I'm considering those hypothetical deaths accidents. Great, okay, we finally have a certifiable accidental death, like David. So are the employees vengeful? Well, again, it gets kinda muddy. It's possible the shadows are the spirits of spring-locked employees. However, this starts to fall apart when we consider that Nightmare in FNAF 4 is called Shadow Freddy, and I doubt some random employee was tormenting Mike or the crying child or whoever's in the bunker or their house or wherever, so I'm gonna say this is our first case of accidental death with no vengefulness. Okay, well, let's keep going and let's look into the Pizzaplex. Here's where things get real messy. Almost every single dead person in the modern era of FNAF seems to have died by the hands of Vanessa or Gregory or the animatronics, which falls into our intentional killings as determined with the sister location animatronics. It's possible that some employees around the Pizzaplex died in genuine accidents. However, with one of the mimics seemingly being in control of all of the systems, that seems doubtful. And besides, we don't see any vengeful spirits in the modern times regardless. That means we're diving straight into Secret of the Mimic. Okay, well, the first known death would be Edwin Sr., who probably just dies of old age, so I'm not even sure if that counts as an accidental death, because it seems to be from natural causes, so I'm eliminating him from the runnings. Sorry, Edwin Sr. Okay, the next death should then be Fiona, right? Most likely, however, again, this is a topic of discussion still at the moment. Some people think that she was killed by Afton, some people think it was a genuine accident, some people think she's F10N4, some people think she just moved on. So I'm again going to call a rain check on this one. I don't think we have enough confirmed information about her death to determine any which way. Although, regardless, I wouldn't say F10N4 is particularly vengeful in the same way, even if she was possessed. So she's also getting kicked out of the runnings. Sorry, Fiona. Okay, next would be David, but since he's the whole topic of the video, we'll come back to that later, which means Edwin is up next. Now, I'm not sure if Edwin is even dead or not, or if this hypothetical death was an accident from his own tests, or the mimic setting off a bomb. So again, I'll have to take Edwin out of the runnings too. We just don't have enough info, which leads us to the employees again. We can assume at least 3 employees of MCM died. Gary, Bob, who was supposed to mark the path in the Tiger segment but seemingly never came back, and the guy who's probably trapped with whatever Sleeping Moon is. However, none of them seem to have their spirits hold much of any presence going forward, and if they did, they don't seem to be vengeful, so that's denied on all 3, which leads us to the Fazbear technicians. So we first got to figure out how many dead employees there are. There's at least 7 dead technicians we can find in-game, and all of them sport the Team 12 label. Now, it's debatable whether or not Team 12 was just one team that was sent in who happened to already have the designation of Team 12, or if Team 12 was the 12th consecutive team sent in to retrieve the Mimic. If it's consecutive, and if each team consists of about the same amount of people, that skyrockets our death count all the way to 84 for Fazbear technicians, and every single one of them seems to have been killed by the Mimic, so intentional killings with no known presence after death, so that's a solid denied on all 84. Okay, so out of all the deaths we've covered so far, there's been no indication of an accident leading to a spirit being vengeful, but we do have other places to look, that being the books. I won't be covering every death because that would be absurd, but I'm going to cover the 2 I can remember off the top of my head. But if I'm missing any that could go for or against my claim, that being it doesn't seem like there are any spirits who are vengeful when they die from an accident, please let me know in the comments. I'm really interested to see if there's anything I missed. But the main 2 I can think of off the top of my head are the kid from Jump for Tickets, where he climbs into the machine and ends up being crushed to death and then seemingly goes on to possess the clown. However, the clown doesn't seem to be vengeful or angry or anything. And then, the most prominent example, Jake. Jake is a kid who died of brain cancer, and then goes on to possess a Simon doll, which then goes on to be combined with a Stitch Wraith. Jake is probably the easiest example of a kid dying in FNAF that remains relevant but not malicious. And in fact, he goes on to help several people. Not just kids, but adults too. So as far as I know, there's not a single case in FNAF of a kid dying due to an accident, or through semi-natural causes, who then goes on to be vengeful and kill people. But there's actually one last example from the books that we have to look at. To figure out what's going on with David Murray in the games, let's take a look at David Murray in the books. This is going to be the single best example of something fishy going on with David that we can find. Let's assume David in the games died in the same way as in the books, being killed during some kind of accident. If the 2 were identical, or at least mostly the same, the way they are after death should look similar too. And yet it's entirely different. David in Tales has no evidence of persisting after his death as a ghost in the factory, let alone presenting as a vengeful version of his stuffed tiger doll. So we have no examples of accidental deaths leading to vengeful spirits in the games or books. And we have the cleanest example of their deaths being different in the games, that being the difference between the way the game and book counterparts are as spirits, or lack thereof. So what is really going on? Well, I think based on these parameters, we can rule out the car accident, based on the past history of needing to use the environment to dig deeper than what's blatantly told, and also based on the fact that his spirit seems angry. So what about the others? Well, I won't rule any of them out just yet. MoonDrop is the next theory with the most amount of likelihood to be considered an accident. However, I won't rule out the possibility of someone maliciously dropping the moon on top of him on purpose. And the other is M1 killing David, which falls in line with the funtime rule set we set up earlier, so that one is okay too. But there's one more option I personally believe to be more likely. But we'll have to look at someone else first, that being the vengeful spirit, the one William should not have killed, Golden Freddy. Now, the comparisons between David as Tiger and Crying Child and Golden Freddy are numerous. Yes, I personally believe the bite victim is the vengeful spirit, bite me about it, but the connections are still prevalent even with Cassidy being the one you should not have killed. But let's take a look at exactly how similar these two are. David and the Crying Child are both seen carrying around a plush version of the spirit they later represent, and the way this spirit attacks is alarmingly similar. Not only does no other spirit in the entire franchise present itself quite the same as Golden Freddy, but the power set that Golden Freddy and the Tiger share is nearly identical. Golden Freddy is known to teleport. We can see that in FNAF 2 in the Into the Pit minigames. And we can physically see Tiger teleport in real time right in front of our eyes. Not only that, Golden Freddy will project its face at whoever it's attacking in FNAF 2, just like Tiger does in the basement levels. Golden Freddy will produce sounds of a child laughing, just like Tiger does with David. And it also seems to simultaneously be a projection of some sort, while also being able to manifest to physically kill you, such as Ralph getting bit after listening to the Bite of 83 over the phone, and Tiger physically grabbing Arnold. There's clearly a connection between these two spirits, and if there's one thing for certain, it's that whoever the one William should not have killed is, who is in Golden Freddy, was someone who was killed by William. No other spirit in the entire franchise acts like this. So if there's two spirits who act identical, I suspect since one of them was killed by William, the other one likely was as well. Keep in mind, Golden Freddy is likely killing Fazbear employees because that's who killed him. And Tiger is also explicitly killing a Fazbear employee as well. Okay, well that's all circumstantial. Is there any evidence in-game that could hint towards William killing David? I mean, that would massively throw off how people have perceived the story up to this point. After all, Charlie has always been assumed to be his first victim. You all know my thoughts on this, but that's beside the point. I did praise how the environments are meant to convey the true story, so let's take a look at the environments to suss this out. So the first place I think we should take a look at is David's hideout in the storytime area. After all, this is where it happens based on MoonDrop, so let's see if there's anything else to look at. Well, right off the bat, there's something very interesting here. One of David's drawings has him holding a specific set of balloons. Do you recognize them? Well, you should. It's the Fazbear Entertainment logo. Why would Steelwool draw this? Sure, they're just balloons. It could just be coincidence. But really, they could have picked any color, but they chose these specific balloons in the exact same fashion as the logo. One slightly above the other and to the side, same orientation and everything. Now, I like to think all things in the environment are placed with purpose, but this is definitely not strong evidence, just something to keep in our mind while we look. So let's keep doing that. So we have a possible connection with the balloons in this area, but there's something else here too. Up in the rafters, in one of the offices, I guess? I suppose this is a control room for the shows. But anyway, there's an audio tape from Edwin, where he says,
Edwin, never forget. They're behind it. Don't trust them. Never tell them. They want to destroy you. Dad was right.
Okay, so we have Fazbear Entertainment being connected to David with the balloons in the storytime area, alongside Edwin mysteriously saying they're behind it, they most likely being Fazbear, and David's ghost presenting exactly like one of Afton's known victims. I don't know about you, but these connections are starting to sound somewhat solid to me, but let's keep looking. I don't believe there's anything else here for us in the storytime area, but since we ended on the topic of audio logs, I'd like to take a look at another one. That being the back and forth from M1 and Edwin.
Edwin, it doesn't make sense. It's terrible, and there's no logic behind it. It happened, and you have to deal with it. You did it before. We can fix things together. I am here to help.
Well, what's so strange about that? It seems pretty normal. Until you really think about how M1 is talking about his death. It doesn't make any sense. Now, I don't know about you, but this to me reads way more as someone did something that lacks logic. It doesn't make sense to kill a child for seemingly no reason, but it would make sense if David was killed in an accident. I mean, it would be tragic, but it's not like it would be a mystery. These things usually have a pretty clear line of logic to them. Left unattended by a loading dock, crushed by a car. Makes sense. It should especially make sense to M1, since she seems to lack a lot of emotion in favor of logistical thinking. Fiona died, I replaced her. David died, replace him. Simple logic that completely lacks the emotional intelligence to understand that that's utterly insane. And in fact, Fiona's lack of emotion here is what seems to snap Edwin out of his delusions.
For the last time, no, it wouldn't be him. Oh, who am I kidding? You're not really you. So stupid.
Edwin, calm down and give it some thought. Try again. Make another, and we can all be together.
All this time wasted? I should have been having fun with him, playing games and teaching him how to make things. But I didn't. You. I let a machine raise my kid. You're not real. What was I thinking?
You do not mean that. It is me. I'm Fiona.
Stop talking like her. You're not her. I never want to hear or even think about you ever again. Ever!
I'd wager a bet that if David had died in a way that had a clear cause and effect, she would probably bluntly state it. But instead, she makes note that what happened doesn't make any sense. Okay, well, maybe I'm reading into the dialogue of a robot too much. Is there anything else in-game that could suggest Afton killed David? I mean, that's a huge leap in logic to assume he'd kill that early in the timeline, right? Well, since we were just talking about Fiona, let's take a look at her. Now, I've laid out all this evidence in my Fred Barn theory already, so go check that out if you want to see it more in depth. But I'm going to speedrun the evidence here for the sake of time. We know that Fazbear has been attending Fall Fest for a while, presumably since 1970 based on the poster for Fall Fest inside the Pizza Sim location. And we also know that Fiona died at a Fall Fest in some sort of fire, based on these audio logs, and this employee questioning if Edwin faked her death at Fall Fest for insurance money.
Ed, I hope this message reaches you as soon as you get a break. I have to go help the Fall Fest crew, just for a few days until the installation is finished.
Oh, why did you go? You weren't even supposed to be there. You were supposed to be here with me and David. Oh, how am I supposed to tell David that his mother is gone? How am I supposed to raise a kid on my own? His life is ruined. My life is ruined.
Have you heard Fiona? I heard it again this morning when I was down in R&D. Very clearly through one of the vents, it was Fiona's voice. I swear to my mother's grave. I heard her and Edwin laughing and joking. Why would Edwin lie about Fall Fest? Did they fake her death for insurance money? I never did trust them.
As well as Fiona's statue in Moon.exe being burned. As well as the seamstress's shop being burned to the ground in Moon.exe. And we know that Fiona not only created the puppets for MCM, but also designed the costumes. So, connecting her death to some fire that happened at Fall Fest, we can take a look at the fire in Help Wanted 2, where in one instance, it happens while playing Phaser Blast, and in the wreckage of the fire, we see Springtrap standing behind the freshly charred Carney. As well as in the carousel level, the fire starting from the barn, which would be just outside the Afton house based on Curse of Dreadbear. And if you've watched my Fred Barn video, you know where I'm going with this, but I believe the barn is in some way, shape, or form related to Fazbear. Specifically, Fredbear's under my interpretation. And in Moon.exe, we can see Sun, who is Fiona. Keep in mind, a sun is a literal ball of fire. Well, plasma realistically, but you get the idea. Inside a building, which has a bear sitting outside the left side of the door, in an almost identical fashion to Fredbear on the wall outside of Fredbear's family diner. And inside the cabin, there are masks, which are probably of Spring Bonnie and Fredbear, based on how they look, and notably, there's a Fredbear's Family Diner oven kit inside the actual oven, implying this cabin is Fredbear's. If that's Fredbear's oven and it's inside the cabin's oven, it's probably Fredbear's Family Diner. This connects Fiona and her death to Fredbear yet again. And last but not least, in the welcome show, on the tree where Fiona first shows up as Mrs. Helpful, we can see her standing right next to a purple snake. Keep in mind, Scott telling PJ, William's voice actor, that he wanted William to sound like a snake oil salesman, as well as the obvious religious imagery of the devil represented as a snake in a tree, paired with Henry telling William not to keep the devil waiting in FNAF 6. And what I believe is the most important factor is that every single character we see throughout the welcome show makes additional appearances throughout the game. The Helpfuls, obviously, but also the Jug Time Band, the birthday dog, even the damn flower drawings. But this snake only exists right here, in this tree next to Mrs. Helpful. This asset was created for the sole purpose of existing next to the character that represents Fiona. Anyways, that's all the environmental evidence of William killing Fiona at Fall Fest, but let's dive into the motivation. I believe that William may have felt threatened by Edwin. Edwin took over the business after his dad died and genuinely started turning the company around. He brought the business out of the red in its net earnings, and Edwin himself described MCM as the leading powerhouse in costume entertainment.
Welcome, potential buyers, to Edwin Murray's Costume Manor, the leading powerhouse in costume entertainment and carnival game technologies. Woo!
If Afton was so sadistic and jealous enough of Henry in the novels for being better than him that it drove him to kill Charlie, and knowing that Charlie was absolutely the thing that would hurt Henry the most, him killing Fiona matches with his previous MO of killing a loved one out of jealousy. Well, I say previous because previous known to us, but obviously in the timeline it would come before. And this is alongside Edwin saying over and over again that he couldn't do this without Fiona, and that she was the heart of the company. Afton would have struck Edwin where it hurt him the most, all for financial gain and to keep himself feeling like he's on top, that there's nobody better than him. But it doesn't quite work out. When Afton killed Henry's kid, he disappeared for a long time. It took him out almost immediately. But Edwin was delusional enough that he believed a robot had replaced his wife, and he kept working. Losing Fiona had only mildly slowed him down, and even worse than that, it gave light to a brand new invention that absolutely dwarfed anything Afton was capable of, the Mimic program. Super intelligent and able to learn roles from watching and listening, as well as having a deep understanding of what someone wanted. And it was able to shapeshift to take any position or character needed. It was the ultimate invention. Afton tried hitting Edwin in his business this time, siphoning employees and messing with the Fazbear contract, but Edwin was relentless. Even if he lost everything else, as long as he had David, he would keep going. And so, this sets up the perfect motive for Afton to have killed David. He may have even taken this lesson to heart later on when he wanted to hurt Henry. He went straight for his kid because that's what worked to remove Edwin from the picture. Okay, that's all well and good for motive, but it's still lacking in some actual real evidence in the game. It's mostly speculation based on character with some minor things that could hint at it. So what else could I pull from to solidify these connections? Well, since we were just talking about Henry, let's take a look at him. Now, I'm sure by now you've all seen the parallels between Edwin and Henry. I mean, hell, before Secret of the Mimic, there were some people debating if Henry was just the game's version of Edwin, since their stories are so similar. Now, if we take that mindset, the idea that Henry and Edwin closely mirror each other, maybe we can suss something out about David's death by looking at Charlie's death. Charlie was murdered outside of a Freddy Fazbear's Pizza while the building was open, either at her own birthday or someone else's based on the way the wristbands are described in Tickets to Fun. And she had an animatronic that was meant to watch her that failed, and it traveled outside to find her corpse. Now, looking at Edwin, David died on his 5th birthday while the manor was open, because workers were actively working before the party. And he had not only a father that failed to watch him, but also an animatronic that should have been watching him too. And the animatronic goes outside to find his corpse. The parallels between David and Charlie's death are immense, and we know for a fact that William killed Charlie, which then gives credence to the idea of William killing David if the parallels continue down that logic. Speaking of the parallels between Charlie and David, let's now take a look at Help Wanted 2. In Help Wanted 2, one of the endings requires us to go through the game collecting dolls that represent children's spirits, and one of those dolls is the puppet, which you receive through typing into a keycode 1983. When we receive this doll, it's handed to us by Glitchtrap, who represents William. Regardless of if you believe his agony or his spirit is involved, the intention is clearly to showcase one of William's victims each time you do a puzzle. Now what's interesting is that in the update that teased Secret of the Mimic, there is a new puzzle added. This puzzle gave us access to David's tiger. And what's really crazy is that this doll is not only handed to us by Glitchtrap again, it reuses the exact same puzzle we used to get the puppet doll. With all the previous laid out parallels between Edwin and Henry and David and Charlie, it's really fitting that both their dolls are retrieved by using the same method. And since so much about them is so similar, I find this act alone compelling for the idea of Afton killing David as well. But there's more evidence we can find for this theory using these dolls. When you redo the puzzles for gathering these dolls, you're given a particular slice of cake by Glitchtrap, instead of the dolls again. Well, except for Chica, but I'm pretty sure the puzzle was just broken with the update. If anyone can find footage of the Chica puzzle giving a cake slice before the Secret of the Mimic update, please let me know in the comments. Anyways, this cake slice is likely a reference to Help Wanted 1, where we're taking the place of Gabriel as we're about to be stuffed into Freddy by Glitchtrap. But before that happens, we're given a slice of cake, and this cake is the official Fazbear Entertainment birthday cake. So to recap this, all of William's victims are represented by these memory dolls. Redoing the puzzles for them gives you a slice of cake, which is a callback to the Fazbear Entertainment cake given to you before you're stuffed by Glitchtrap in Help Wanted 1. Cool, so why is this cake important? What's that got to do with David? Well, for that, we need to look at Secret of the Mimic, inside David's party room in the admin wing. If we take a look at the tape inside this room, we can see the items on the table. Nothing in particular seems to stand out, but the fact that nothing stands out will become important in a second. What does stand out in the tape is the cake that M1 bakes for David. It's relatively flat and square, a typical cake for a birthday party. Now, the reason I said the fact that nothing stands out on the table is important is because when we enter the room in 1979, 3 years and some change after David's death, we see the same items on the table, albeit in a slightly changed orientation, but in general the same cake, the same hats and plates, and the same old moldy Fazbear's pizza. But there's one more thing that does stand out a lot. Take a look at the cake given to Gabriel in Help Wanted. Now, I'm going to blow your mind with this. That's the exact same kind of cake sitting at the table of David's party. Now, pay attention to this cake slice. Every other bit of food in the party is old and moldy. However, this slice of cake is clearly pristine. It's intentionally made to draw your attention to it. The other thing that's sitting right by the cake is a Fall Fest certificate of participation. And since we've made the connection prior to Afton at Fall Fest killing Fiona, that then means that this cake slice is also likely representing something of Afton in some way. And as we've made the connection of the cake slices to Afton's victims through both Help Wanted games, that then goes on to imply that David was also one of Afton's victims, since the cake slice is at David's party, likely for David. Also keep in mind that this slice of cake is explicitly from an official Fazbear Entertainment cake, which is the second time David has been connected to them, with the first being him holding the Fazbear Entertainment balloons in his hideout. Okay, so we've got the idea of David being killed by Afton, but why make this the case? Afton wasn't needed for David's death, so why even make him kill David at all if it's true? He could have died in the same way as the books and wouldn't have changed the story, right? Well, I could talk about what this means for Charlie 87, with Charlie not being the first victim of Afton, and so recontextualizing Henry's wound. However, this video isn't about that, it's about David. So what does this mean for David? Well, I think it implies something about the Mimic. Remember back to when I was connecting the parallels of Edwin and Henry and Charlie and David. I said this could help with the idea of Afton killing David, but what I didn't expound on is how the parallels would continue on even from that point. In the case of Charlie, the animatronic that was meant to watch her follows her outside and finds her body. She then goes on to possess that animatronic. In the case of David, the Mimic was meant to watch him, and it goes outside to find his body. The logic would then dictate that David should then also go on to possess the Mimic. That's all well and good using parallels, but is there any actual evidence of this within the game? Well, it's time we take a good look back at our dear friend environmental storytelling. So, my first and favorite piece of evidence for this is the audio tape of Edwin beating M2. Let's take a listen.
Stop. Not him. You're not. Stop sounding like him.
Now, this by itself isn't really all that much. In fact, it kind of implies the exact opposite, right? He says you're not him. Well, while that's true, I'd like to really think about Edwin and how valid his word is. I mean, he's not really the most trustworthy person when it comes to his opinion on things. He's constantly wrong about stuff. He thinks David's playground is safe, he thinks William is his friend, etc. I wouldn't really take Edwin at face value for this. How would he know to begin with? But again, I said we look at the environment of the game, so let's take a look around where this audio log is found. We're in this room with a mail log and a Cleano vac and some other stuff, not much going on. But directly below us, probably 30 feet away, right after we listen to the audio log of Edwin beating M2, we come across a door that opens into the White Tiger segment. This is directly connecting M2 getting beat to the tiger, and it gets even better. Listen to what Edwin says one more time.
Stop. You're not him. You're not. Stop sounding like him.
And now, listen to one of the possible voice lines to get upon finding the tiger literally 30 feet away.
Stop! You're not him! You're not! Stop sounding like him! Stop! You're not him! You're not! Stop sounding like him!
Now, since the tiger is almost certainly David's ghost... Whoa, hold on now. Now, I know this is a debated topic still, but aside from all the evidence points you've probably already heard by now, such as Tiger's connections to Golden Freddy, with Golden Freddy being a ghost and whatnot, I've come across what I believe to be actual pretty good evidence of Tiger being David's ghost. When we look back at the way the audio files are listed and named for the Tiger voice lines, they're actually listed under David, alongside his normal voice lines for when he's alive. Here's a video of Kato Kato digging through the files for me to provide evidence of this.
Alright. So, this is the actual game files in real time. These are updated as well. FNAF Sodom. Content. Wise Audio, that's their audio handler that they use. Events. Theo. Actually, yeah. That might be under events. Yeah, that's under events. David. Alright. Well, let's open it.
Why won't you play with me? Why won't you play with me? Stop! You're not him! You're not! Stop sounding like him! Stop! You're not him! You're not! Stop sounding like him! Daddy's busy, buddy! Why don't you go outside and play? Daddy's busy, buddy! Why don't you go outside and play? I baked it myself for David's special day.
Why does it look like that?
Why won't you play with me? Why won't you play with me?
It's scary. Like what?
Why won't you play with me?
This would seem to imply that Tiger is just David's ghost, especially since some of the Tiger voice lines are called David Ghostly. Now, a counter-argument I've heard for this is that since they're being spoken by the same voice actor, they may have just put all the audios together even if Tiger wasn't meant to be David. However, if this were true, you'd expect to find the audios of M2 copying Edwin under the Edwin voice lines, since it would be the same voice actor, just like what's argued for David and Tiger. But M2 mimicking Edwin is listed under Mimic 2 in the files. For context, Caitlin names all of the sections as they're named in the files, like how I showed you earlier with Tiger voice lines being called David. You can see that here on our YouTube channel.
Why won't you play with me? Why won't you play with me? Stop! You're not him! You're not! Stop sounding like him!
Now, here's the voice lines of M2 mimicking Edwin, simply called Mimic 2.
Test. Journal entry. Too bad the new power test was a failure. Due to a minor detonation. There is damage to my office interior, as well as a small fire. Note to self, a portable cleaner that gets rid of smoke damage. Stop. You're not him. You're not! Stop sounding like him!
Welcome, potential buyers, to Edwin Murray's Costume Manor, the leading powerhouse in costume entertainment and carnival game technologies. Woo!
Why don't you go outside and play? You know, speaking of legs, what do you think? I just finished mine.
So they definitely separate the voice lines based on what character is meant to be saying them, not based on which voice actor is saying them, meaning Tiger is almost certainly just David's ghost. Anyways, I just wanted to provide evidence and context for this claim. Back to the regular video. Why on earth would it be mimicking M2 getting beat? In fact, let's listen to a couple more voice lines Tiger says and compare them.
Stop. You're not him. You're not! Stop sounding like him!
Stop! You're not him! You're not! Stop sounding like him! Stop! You're not him! You're not! Stop sounding like him! Stop! You're not him! You're not! Stop sounding like him! Stop! You're not him! You're not! Stop sounding like him!
Daddy's busy, buddy. Why don't you go outside and play?
Daddy's busy, buddy. Why don't you go outside and play? Daddy's busy, buddy. Why don't you go outside and play?
I'm sorry, M2. I lost my temper. I was always gonna fix you.
I'm sorry, M2. I lost my temper. I was always going to fix you.
Fiona, did you make this?
I baked it myself. For David's special day.
Well, great job. You just continue to surprise me. All right, I think we're ready. Okay, everyone hide. Fiona, go get him. I left him out at the playground.
I baked it myself for David's special day. I left him out at the playground. I baked it myself for David's special day. I miss Mommy. I miss Mommy. I love you.
So I think it's very clear that Tiger is connected to M2, but this doesn't make any sense. Why? How? Well, since we're making connections to Golden Freddy before, let's do that again and see if we can figure anything out. So I think we can make an argument for the Golden Freddy in FNAF 1 to not really exist as we see it. In FNAF 1, it looks brand new and refurbished, but it's definitely discontinued at this point in time. And the last we saw of it, it was all broken down in the 87 location. Why would Fazbear spend money repairing a discontinued spring lock? Well, I'm not convinced that they would, considering how money hungry and cheap they are. Which leads me to believe that the fixed up Golden Freddy in the FNAF 1 location is a projection.
Kelsey's a projection.
Basically, the spirit within Golden Freddy can't move the suit normally, or has less control over it for whatever reason. And so the only way that the spirit can reach out or do anything is by projecting its spirit outwards. We can even see this as probably being the case with Ticket to Fun, where Golden Freddy is drawn with the FNAF 1 gang on the poster as withered, like he was in FNAF 2. We also see Golden Freddy being withered in the FNAF 1 location in the movie, but he's also moving around and physical in that movie, so I'm not sure what to make of it. The movies have strange lore. Anyways, since Golden Freddy is projecting out of the animatronic as a different thing than it physically is, relating that to Tiger and M2, I would say that Tiger is David's spirit projecting out of M2 because he can't control it for whatever reason. For David, I would argue it's because the spirit likely can't overpower the AI that they possess. In FNAF 1, the Freddy's gang are forced to go back to their stage at 6 AM every day and are stuck there until midnight, and then they regain the ability to free roam. The spirits can only control the animatronics when there isn't a direct code controlling them already. Think back to the fun times as well. Circus Baby is constantly saying that what she does is bad, and that she can't control it. She doesn't want to hurt kids, but she has no choice. Now, maybe this is just manipulative behavior from Baby, it would be in character for her, but there are also examples like the puppet. Whoa, hold on again. another message from me while I'm editing. I wanted to touch a tiny bit more on Circus Baby. Not only does Baby also likely run on some form of mimic program, since the Fun Times have voice mimicking capabilities and the sister location bunker is likely the tunnels under MCM, but this is exactly an example of what I'm arguing for here. Elizabeth possesses Baby, that much is certain, and yet Baby kills children because that's her programming. Elizabeth most likely wasn't willing to kill several kids her age just because she was told to, meaning these homicidal acts are coming from the program Elizabeth is possessing. Carry that over to David and M2, David could be in M2 and unable to stop M2 from killing, because M2 mimicked rage. It's also pretty fitting that in this example, both robots being possessed have mimic abilities. Just because I'm saying David possesses M2, it doesn't mean that M2 is David, the same way that Circus Baby killing kids isn't Elizabeth. Alright, anyways, back to the puppet. Charlie can't leave the box and control the puppet as long as the music box is wound, likely because the AI overpowers the spirit. So with David, who is again a very good parallel to Charlie, he likely wouldn't be able to control M2 because M2 is running on a constant directive of being in mimic mode. It doesn't have lulls in its programming where it's not meant to be doing anything, it's always active. We do, however, see that when M2 is being convinced to be David in the storytime ending, it does calm down and act like him, as well as undergoing an eye color change. This to me is fairly reminiscent of things like the puppet gaining tears after possession, or hell, an even better direct example, a very likely version of the mimic code exists within the Fun Times due to the voice mimicking feature. And when Elizabeth possesses Baby, her eye colors change from blue to green. That's a direct example of some form of the mimic changing its eye colors after possession. Well, it's possible the eye color change is just a base feature of the mimic, so what else can we look at? Well, all throughout the game, we're talking to Dispatch, who is M1, but when we get to reveal that M1 has been dispatched the whole time, she's only subtitled as F10N4 from that point on. Hey, editing Fazbear here again. I just needed to come in to clarify. I was double checking and I replayed that section of the game. It says F10N4 when you first enter the room, but then continues to say Fiona after that. But I checked the patch notes and it does say that it was supposed to be fixed to say F10N4. So I'm not sure what's going on. I think maybe the game is bugged. But this is mildly incorrect. I just wanted to get that out there. It does say it's supposed to be this way in the patch notes, but it's only partially this way, so I don't know what's going on, but I just wanted to clarify that because I was double checking my words and I came across that, so that's all. Conversely, whenever we see M2 mimic specific people, like Edwin, M2 is explicitly subtitled as just M2. However, when we do this secret ending and M2's eye color changes, we can see that M2 is subtitled as just David. I don't believe this is an error either, since the game updated and actually changed F10 subtitles from Fiona to F10N4, but M2 is still credited as David at this moment, indicating it might actually just be David. Okay, well, subtitles aren't super reliable or a strong point of evidence, so what else can we look at? Well, since we were talking about the storytime ending, let's take a look at what gets us there and go through Moon.exe. At the end of Moon.exe, you put a bunch of David's items in a specific order to receive the glitched permission. However, if we do the order correctly, and then wait before entering the closet, and we reread the book, it says, to sleep the tiger, you must first complete the story. Then, when we receive the permission and go on to read a story to M2, which puts him to bed, he says goodnight. So, completing the story sleeps the tiger, and by completing the story, we put M2 to sleep. We can also be fairly certain that the tiger is David's spirit, and the game is straight up telling us the tiger is M2 in this scenario. Okay, so Afton might have killed David, and David probably possesses M2. Cool. What does that mean, though? What's the point? I mean, I know a lot of you probably dislike what this would mean for the story if it were true. Well, what we think might be best for the story isn't always what actually is best. Think about Tales games. So much of the community thought that having Tales not be canon to the games would be bad for the story. But after we got Secret of the Mimic, many changed their mind. Steelwell and Scott are very capable writers. I'm confident that whatever they make for the story will end up being for the better in the future. And so the only thing that truly matters to me is what the evidence is indicating. Okay, I don't know how I kept missing things in my original script, but I promise this is the last one. I came to the conclusion of William killing David, but I didn't really expound on it any more than that. However, I believe if this is true, it could explain a couple of things. So, consider this. We know that M1 told Edwin to keep her hidden from the rest of the staff, and we also know that Edwin intended M1 originally to wear different costumes around the manor. Now, one of the major things that's been missing from Secret of the Mimic is the usage of the Glitchtrap costume, or an explanation of where it came from and why it's important. It may be possible that William lured David in the Glitchtrap costume, David believing it to be M1 because he was used to her wearing costumes like this, and William could have killed him then. This would keep the importance of Edwin being at fault by saying the playground is safe. It may not have necessarily been about a car that was being set up, but it being open for David to be lured away and killed. If you believe Glitchtrap is M2, this may explain why M2 chooses this persona. It's a manifestation of David's specific trauma with this character. Now, another strange issue that's been bugging me since Secret of the Mimic's release is the fact that M2 shoves bodies into suits after they're dead. This had previously been assumed to be an Afton-specific trait, and yet with M2 doing it before the MCI, it seemed that Afton had mimicked the Mimic. However, if Afton had killed David, it's possible that he shoved David into the Tiger suit after he killed him, explaining David's connections with Tiger outside of it just being his favorite plush. And then when M1 found David's body, it was ingrained into the Mimic's code that dead bodies are to be shoved into suits. So when the code of M1 was copied over into M2, and after M2 learned violence, it shoved bodies into suits, since it saw that's what had happened to David when it was M1. Now, I know I also just talked about the Tiger suit being a real thing. We can see here with these candy bars that Tiger was an officially licensed character of MCM, and with all the other licensed characters having costumes, it would make sense that Tiger actually did have a physical costume, not just a ghostly projection or whatever else. There was probably an actual Tiger mascot. Now, one last thing that I want to bring up that I hadn't mentioned in the video is that I know many prefer the Mimic's story to be simply about AI, and not about any spirits or possession. However, the beauty of having two Mimics is that you can play with both plotlines simultaneously. Edwin may have become disillusioned with the possibility of a Mimic being possessed because M1 really was just code, which led him to immediately assume that it was impossible for M2, because he had already experienced the deception with M1. This would further the tragedy of Edwin beating M2. David was murdered by someone he thought was his mother figure, a robot pretending to be her after her death, and then after possessing the Endo is trapped within the code, unable to do anything. And when the Endo he's in begins to impersonate him, he's beaten by his own father, unsure of what he did wrong. Killed by a stranger who he thought was his mother, and beaten by his father and abandoned. It makes sense that the Mimic is so full of rage. It's not just copied, it's personal as well. It had so much spite for Edwin when it attacked him. It forms entirely new sentences, something M2 hadn't done before this point, just to mock him as he bled out. Alright, anyways, I just wanted to provide some possible ways that the story could play out if the theory is true, and hopefully try and make the narrative more appealing if you weren't a fan of it originally. Back to the rest of the video. I think we're meant to figure out what's going on first, and then the story will come later, and it'll probably be better than what we could have guessed. Maybe they'll make David and M2 into a Jake and Andrew situation, but with AI. David trying to do good, but unable to fight against the angry AI of M2. I'm not really sure, but to be frank, I don't really care. I trust that the story will be the best that it can be. Anyways, I hope you all can proceed with the story the same way, trusting the story will be good regardless, and so accepting all the evidence is valid regardless of how it may affect your perception on the narrative. But that's all I have for today. Thank you for watching. Man, I gotta be honest here. Fazbear Entertainment stocks are not looking good. After all these leaks, the Ultimate Guide being trash, people are dropping off quick. Not to mention my own franchise locations. Charlie died first in the movie universe, so people have been selling their 87 stocks. Of course, Fred Barn helped with that a bit, but there's got to be something I can do. We may end up having to cut costs elsewhere. I've heard that there's this new generative AI thing that can replace human employees. I think Edwin just called it the Mimic. Maybe it's time to let go of one of our top night guards, Johnny. Nah, that's stupid. Come on, think.
Hello,
huh?
I am Eleanor Paradox. I hear you're having some hard times as a company. Perhaps I can help you out. Let's have ourselves a trade of favors. Do something for me, and I can make all your wishes come true.
What the hell? Are you kidding me? There's no way. There is absolutely no way in hell, not in a million years, that Fazbear Entertainment would pass up an opportunity as morally bankrupt and exorbitantly greedy as this. You've got yourself a deal. It'll be a pleasure to do business with you.
This is the end of the company-wide mandatory update. We hope you enjoyed your stay here. Employees will be asked to leave comments and concerns in the space provided below this video. Please subscribe to Fazbear Entertainment to receive more company news. And remember to smile. You are the face of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. Oh, and thanks for being a valued member of the Fazbear team.